Most people who lose themselves don't lose everything in one dramatic moment. There's not a single event or obvious breaking point. Just one day they look up and have a hard time recognizing the person looking back. I want to explain how this process happens because understanding how you get to this point is the only way for you to catch yourself before the process is complete. I know how it feels to shrink yourself because the comfort is hard to escape. It starts small. Usually you don't notice it. You don't share an opinion because the room doesn't quite feel safe. You laugh at a joke that doesn't sit quite right with you just to feel included. Or you agree with something you may not truly believe simply because disagreeing feels like too much of a hassle. And in the moment, each of these choices seems like the rational decision. And you'll tell yourself that you're being mature, reading the room, or avoiding conflict. But what you're actually doing is teaching yourself that your real reaction is inconvenient. You teach yourself that your authentic response is a problem. And I would often catch myself downplaying my interest for reading, writing, starting various side hustles simply just to avoid being judged as nerdy or some type of tryhard. And when I would express these feelings, people would often tell me, "Hey, live a little, loosen up." They'd ask me, "Do you even have fun?" Or I'd receive some sort of backhanded praise about my hard work. So I ended up teaching myself to swallow my ambition in certain social settings and to just be quote-unquote normal. And that's the problem. Once concession becomes a reflex, you stop noticing you're doing it because it happened before you consciously decided anything. The opinion is already swallowed before you chose to swallow it. The laugh was already out before you even decided if something was funny. This is where it gets dangerous because it becomes automatic and you've created a habit. And habits don't feel like a decision, they feel like a part of your personality. And you start to confuse the shrunk version of yourself for the real you. And I subconsciously became embarrassed of my effort and passions. And whenever I get asked about work or projects that were going on, I'd downplay the work I was putting in just to seem less serious or intimidating. And I would tell people that I've been relaxing more and watching more TV, playing video games on my days off, and all this just to seem more relatable. Partially, I did this out of the fear that if my endeavors didn't plan out, at least it wouldn't look like I tried too hard from the outside. And this is where shrinking yourself moves from just something that's social and external to an internal belief. It's not just what you say aloud in rooms to others, it's about what you allow yourself to want. You stop bringing up the thing that you're building because the room can't hold it. You downplay your goals because the people surrounding you would find it ambitious to the point of delusion. You stop saying things out loud, and when you stop saying things, they feel less real. And this stage can be embarrassing to admit, because you're telling yourself that you want less so that you can stay comfortable somewhere else, and that hurts. I noticed that I stopped talking about my business I was building, the books I was reading, the workout routine I was doing, my diet, my writing, and things that I found genuinely interesting because I wanted to avoid looking delusional or having people ask me if that's all I ever do. And once you reach this stage, you lose your authentic opinion in social settings. When you're asked for your input, you'll look around the room and choose the most popular vote or say that it doesn't really matter to you. You choose what seems reasonable rather than what's actually true. And you've been performing this version of yourself for so long that the performance becomes your default. Your opinions and feelings are definitely still there, but they become so buried that it requires deliberate effort to find them. In my own way, I found myself becoming the yes man, going to parties even though I hated them, eating at places I had no interest in, and playing games like blackjack and poker despite my hatred for gambling. I chose whatever the popular opinion was to avoid conflict or just out of the fear of being labeled a loser. And at this point, shrinking yourself feels justified. It seems like the most reasonable way to survive the room. You tell yourself that it's the socially intelligent thing to do, and that you're not losing yourself, you're simply adapting. And the problem is that in isolation, these justifications aren't wrong. The problem is that the justifications have compounded. Each reasonable compromise has been built on each other, creating some structure. And this structure is the optimized version of yourself for the comfort of everyone else. And these people are allergic to your own truth. And it always seemed like the logical thing to do to shrink myself, to conform, to fit into the group, and to be included. Because the devil that I knew was more comfortable than the devil of isolation that I didn't yet know. And after a night out, I couldn't really recognize myself. I came home and I stayed up all night looking at myself, knowing that the real me would never be at a frat party out of my own fruition, and that I would never gamble on my own accord. And at that moment, it just kind of clicked in my head that I was becoming a version of myself that was inauthentic to my values and beliefs. Whether this moment is big or small, you'll come to your own moment. A conversation where you hear yourself and think that's not actually what I believe, or a room that you walk into and immediately become overtaken by the feeling that you have to perform. An old photo or journal entry that reminds you of the version of yourself that you stopped being without ever deciding to. And as I sat there that night, as hour after hour passed, I read my journal, I opened my Bible, and I found note cards and reminders of old goals that I had set for myself. At that point, it truly hit me, and I was able to internalize that I was actually being led astray. And finding your way back isn't some dramatic overnight process. The way back is pretty much the same mechanism, but in reverse. One honest response where you would have stayed quiet, one opinion shared in a room that might not receive it well, one admission of what you actually want instead of what seems acceptable. And the goal isn't to be someone who intentionally starts conflict and to never read the room. It's just to be someone who knows the difference between choosing silence and being silenced. For me, I started by saying no to the late night outings that didn't serve me, by choosing my health and sleep, by telling people who truly cared about me and my goals, ambitions in detail, and by starting to create publicly for the betterment of people just like myself. I think the most radical thing that you can do in a world that asks you to conform for the comfort of others is to be yourself, to know what you think, to know what you want, and what you're actually feeling. Not in a bold, loud, or performative way, just quietly and consistently, refusing to shrink yourself. I'm glad to say that I successfully stopped shrinking my passions and ambitions, and I hope that this video will put you on the right path to realizing your true desires. Anyways, it's been Dread.